So today I thought I would look at what it actually means to be woke. So, okay, historically, the term woke was really popularized in the mid-1990s. This was related a lot to racial justice movements, kind of essentially meant being aware of the racial injustice and oppression that was going on at the time. And the meaning has kind of shifted since then, so I'm going to explore that as well. Okay, there are over 331 million Americans. You are going to get quite a few terrible stories coming out of a country which has a huge number of guns and a lot of crime, and quite frankly, I'm just saying, a lot of these towns and cities and streets in America are absolutely appalling. I mean, well, as you guys can see, this will go on for hours. Literally, this is like an hour-long video. It looks like a failing state to me. And, you know, this goes on and on and on. And again, I don't know how widespread this stuff is, but I've seen tent cities in America. I've seen huge amounts of poverty. This is Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia. And I've skipped this forward by about 10 minutes, and as you guys can see, this just goes on and on and on. And okay, this is what I wanted to set the stage with, right? Real problems. So Ron DeSantis in America, his administration has defined it as the belief there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them. So let me break that down, okay? Systemic injustices. That would mean that certain segments of the American population are actively discriminated against. And they absolutely are. As that video saw, poor people, people who are rural, in a lot of rural areas, or even in inner cities, are absolutely suffering from all kinds of horrendous injustice, you know? But again, does intersectionality, which we're going to be covering, actually address the problem? Does it even diagnose a problem? Is it even useful? Or is it divisive? Right, this is what we're going to be looking at. So he goes on to say, we reject the woke ideology and we will never ever surrender to the woke agenda. People have come here because of our policies, right? So here he is suggesting that actually America is a pretty good place to live generally, and people go to his state or the country in general because they like the American ideas which the country was founded on, which in a nutshell are called whiteness. And this is one of the great enemies of social justice and the woke movement, this concept of whiteness. And this has very little to do with skin tone, although people with the white skin tone are obviously targeted. This is more to do with culture and ideas and tradition and basically the sort of English inheritance that America has. And okay, people might disagree with that, but after looking into this, that seems to be what they hate. And they seem to hate the fundamental premise of America, which is that everyone, regardless of colour or creed or background, should be able to have, you know, the same opportunities to be successful, and there shouldn't be any discrimination, and they should, you shouldn't codify it. A lot of the anti-woke people reject to race-related content in education, for example, because they see it as being divisive. And I'm speaking from an American context here, right? Instead of being taught that you are an American and that is your central identity, people are being divided into margins, and they're being divided into segments instead of being American, which is, I think, the fundamental difference between the liberal American worldview and the Republican worldview.
No question, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years.
I want to talk to you about mostly black stuff.
I get overwhelming support from the black leadership, young and old. Every poll shows me way ahead.
And black people saved your political life in the primaries this year. They have things they want from you. And one of them is a black woman running mate. What do you say to them?
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now? Hot sauce. Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people.
Okay. Is it working?
So, again, Ron DeSantis was fighting against some race-related content that covers intersectionality, or the idea that systems of oppression should be the primary lens through which teaching and learning are analysed and are improved upon. So, let's look at what intersectionality actually is, because it's quite an easy concept with a graphic. I think we really have to look at the Communist Manifesto. The bourgeoisie, who are basically the rich, the elite, is constantly fighting with the aristocracy and other groups, and they need to drag in the sort of working classes, the proletariat. Since they are characterized by the fact that they own nothing, their mission is to destroy all previous securities for and insurances of individual property, collectivize everything basically, take it away from the people who have it and redistribute it to everybody else. Or what actually happens is it just goes to the government, and the government become unbelievably powerful, which leads to the government being corrupt and creating a horrible society which turns into a nightmare. But yeah, I'm not biased at all. So at some point, workers in the West became a lot richer up until about the 1970s, and since then wages for the working classes have stagnated, and even though a lot of produce and products has become cheaper, so we can buy a TV from China, for example, much more affordably thanks to a globalization, everyone has really benefited apart from the working class. There's still an awful lot of poverty around, you know, in the UK, in other countries as well, especially in America. We just looked at those pictures earlier, didn't we, of the people on the streets. You know, they haven't benefited from globalization. They haven't benefited from modern society, right? I mean, this outlines how the bourgeoisie can no longer be in charge of society. They cannot take care of their own slaves and keep them alive. So what you have here is a dichotomy. Di meaning two, enemy, and the good people, the proletariat, the two warring groups, the evil group and the good group, and we have to get rid of the evil group. You get the idea. We can see how the bourgeoisie, with their behaviour, are digging their own graves. Lovely. That kind of summarises the idea that we're going to be looking at next, which is this lovely wheel. This is basically a wheel of marginalisation, or as they call it, power and privilege. People on the outside of the wheel are the marginalised, as you can see. And we're going to look at why this wheel is actually really kind of inadequate and doesn't really explain a lot of the nuance. So, okay, let's have a look at some of these things. White in the middle. I was talking about whiteness earlier briefly. Whiteness is seen as the evil thing in America. A lot of people hate it.
You have a token white and you're hanging out with your friend group of color. You need to ask permission from everybody in the group to bring your white friend. Like, don't just bring them with them. I might not be in the mood to deal with white shenanigans that day. That's all I'm saying. And another thing, it feeds into their ego. Like, don't let them think they're a good white person.
Accomplices ask, how can they support Black and Indigenous people of color? And sometimes I really don't know what to say, but here's one easy way. Just don't have babies.
Can single-handedly cause the white genocide that they are so afraid of. With 2.25 billion Asian women and 500 million white men, baby, it'll only take 2 generations. In 2 generations, there will no longer be any blonde-haired.
These are some things I noticed about white American culture. Being grounded is a punishment to them. That's what they call punishment. The least grounded, least balanced, most destructive race considers being grounded a punishment? Yeah. They also say really violent phrases. They say things like, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Why do we have to kill the birds? Why is everything so violent? It's almost like one's language and phrases reflects one's nature.
So that new Jeffrey Dahmer movie on Netflix is the perfect example of the sensationalization of white violence. People have a much easier time sympathizing with white criminals than they do with Black victims. And people think these shows are harmless, but they actually contribute to a much bigger issue. It contributes to the viewpoint that white people are less violent than everyone else, and white violence is something to be consumed in media, and that's it.
What is with Caucasian people and like their inability?
You're not one of the good white people. Stop separating us from the bad white people. Don't sit out there in comments and say, we don't claim them. We are them.
White people are inherently racist.
Yeah.
Can you be racist against white people?
Based off of the definition of racism, yes, but it's not gonna hurt them and hurt their opportunities like it does people of color.
Well, technically you can. It's not like an issue.
You can't oppress the oppressor.
It helps you sleep at night. I'm racist to white people. I'm proud of it.
Why do people not understand that you can't be racist to white people? It's impossible. The system is not set up that way. You can insult white people, but it is not racism. Me calling a white person a tub of mayonnaise and like a flower looking ass, that's not racist.
You went all the way to Africa to physically take black people from their homes, shove them in on boats where a lot of them got diseases and died.
People say, for example, that whiteness, etc., must be destroyed. So look at this. This was a recent placard, and I've heard it before. You're either on the white side or the right side of history. Here we have basic racial hatred, right? Very, very recent, actually. Very, very topical. And look, it's in London, of all places. There is a sort of hatred of whiteness and white people, and I just find it ridiculous because, like I said earlier, the whole point of America was meant to be that everybody was equal, or they should be equal. So this sort of racial hatred stuff, it just is counterproductive as far as I'm concerned. And I can't imagine anything worse than teaching this to a child, right? A child who is innocent, who probably doesn't know much about the world. Some horrible academic comes in and starts teaching the child all about how they should feel racial guilt because of the colour of their skin for something that they never even did. It is a disgusting concept, and this is why people don't like wokeness. Right? Because it teaches children to hate themselves, or it teaches children that they are a victim. And I don't think that is something that we should be promoting. White people in the UK are actually the least likely to go to university, right? It's just because there's a big focus and push for girls, and the education system has been redesigned for girls to help girls. You know, there's all these inspirational things you see on TV for girls, and that's great, that's wonderful, but where's the equivalent for boys? You know, I don't see it. And boys are really suffering, generally speaking. Here we have English as a first language, learned English being slightly marginalized, and then non-English monolingual. Okay, I agree. If you are in an English-speaking country and you can't speak English, that is a big disadvantage. But learned English? Are you kidding me? This means that you know 2 or more languages. Now, I literally went to a job interview, and the woman absolutely hated me, and she called me stupid because she said I only knew 1 language, and she said, well, why don't you learn some more languages? So I think this is completely wrong here. I think if you know multiple languages, you are at a massive advantage. I would actually love to know Chinese Mandarin. I would love to know Arabic. I wish I was more fluent in Spanish and other languages as well. If I had English as a second language, I don't see that as a big disadvantage necessarily. Anyway, got cisgender, man, cisgender woman. So according to this, men have more power than women. The reverse is actually true. If you look at university rates, women are significantly more likely to get a higher education. Young women aged 20 to 30 are now earning more than young men. But yeah, this is basically wrong because it codifies things that aren't necessarily true. You've got white in the middle here. I don't know if you folks have seen, but in the UK we literally have jobs advertised to people who are not white, and they said that basically whites should not apply. The BBC was actually offering a whole bunch of jobs to people who aren't white. I think every job should be open to everyone, right? Okay, the BBC is under fire for only allowing people from ethnic minorities to apply for a trainee position working on shows like Springwatch. So yeah, it's trainee position, it's £17,000 a year, and it's only open to black, Asian and ethnically diverse candidates. This isn't an isolated thing. This actually does happen in the UK. The BBC have done this before. There are opportunities that are only open to ethnic minorities, and white people can go away. The RAF recruitment arm has effectively been told to take a pause on offering jobs to white male recruits in the hope that more slots can be filled by women and ethnic minorities during this financial year. We are really pro-diversity and we want to see better representation across the services, but blah 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 blah. Who cares? They are racist. Every opportunity should be open to everyone. You shouldn't hire based on race, right? It's just wrong in my view. Again, this is wokeness coming in and saying there aren't enough people who look like this, so you need to do something about it. You need to basically discriminate against people to get the quotas looking right. So of course, if you teach people all about marginalization and all about how they're either oppressors like the bourgeoisie or victims like the proletariat, except you use different categories, then you get stuff like this. This was a sort of Coca-Cola brand, and this was apparently a compulsory course for people were taking at the time. To be less white is to be less oppressive, be less arrogant, okay. Be less certain, oh, okay. Be less defensive, be less ignorant, be more humble. You have to listen, believe. Oh, I believe that these are a bunch of racists. Break with apathy and break with white solidarity. I've never ever experienced white solidarity in my life. That's not how Britain works. This is America, obviously, but this was a compulsory course that they were putting on. And there are many more courses like this, probably going out of fashion a little bit because they are so disgustingly racist.
You can't oppress the oppressor.
Why do people not understand that you can't be racist to white people? It's impossible. The system is not set up that way. You can insult white people, but it is not racism. Me calling a white person a tub of mayonnaise and like a flower looking ass, that's not racist.
You went all the way to Africa.
In 2010-11, there were more female than males enrolled in university, so this is just looking at gender. Since then it's got a lot worse. So I won't spend too much time on this, but women were a third more likely to start a degree than their male counterparts, despite the fact there are more young men than women in the UK. So, okay, so much for that big wheel saying that women are super oppressed or whatever. I mean, yeah, in some ways, but if you look at anything, 90% of people in prison are men. Men are more likely to suffer violence on the streets. Men are more likely to be killed by a massive margin. Men are 3 to 4 times more likely to be homeless. I'm sure you've heard these statistics before, but just saying with a blanket statement it's better to be one gender than the other isn't necessarily true. In education, for example, only 17.7% of white British pupils achieved 5 or above in English and maths, which is one of our measurements for how well people are doing, compared 22.5% of all eligible pupils. So yeah, I mean, again, if we look at the marginalization chart, is it always better to be white? No, not if you want to do well at university or at school. Coming back to the whiteness thing, percentage of state school pupils aged 18 getting a higher education place by ethnicity over time. Okay, so Where's the white people? Are they at the top? Are they super privileged here? No, it's Chinese people. That's great, wonderful. I think everybody should be able to get the maximum amount of education that they want, right? Wonderful. Asian, doing pretty good. Black, doing much better than the white people, actually. Mixed race people, yeah, doing good. And oh, right at the bottom, yeah, white people, right at the bottom of the higher education chart. So is it better to be white? No. This stupid wheel that they're going to teach to kids is just wrong. That previous chart was from the UK. We now have one from America that says, yeah, white Americans are doing okay. College enrollment rates of 18 to 24-year-olds by race ethnicity. Yeah, Asians are doing pretty darn well. And actually, there was a big push in America to try to get less Asians into higher education and to try to help Black and Hispanic students by basically making it easier for certain people to get in and harder for other people to get in. This was recently outlawed. I think they called it affirmative action. But yeah, again, that's another woke policy, which is kind of disgusting because everybody should have an equal opportunity to get in. Crime, people shot in America. I get the sense that this is more about social class and poverty than it is about ethnicity or race. So, for example, people who are doing well in society are probably far less likely to get shot, for example, than people who are doing very poorly. But like I showed you earlier in that footage, a lot of people are doing very bad. Half of the fatal shootings were of white people, blacks 27%, Hispanics 19%, Asians 2%, Native Americans 2%. But okay, let's look at LGBTQ stuff, right? Here's an interesting statistic. We can see on the marginalization thing that gay men are more discriminated against than straight men. Gay men actually earn 10% more than straight men. Now, interestingly, lesbians earn a little bit less. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily discrimination. It could just mean that there's other factors. Putting everything down to discrimination is kind of stupid, actually. Poverty rate for married couples. So yeah, female people are at a higher rate of poverty than male people. So I guess it's better to be a man, gay man, I guess. Certainly doesn't really match up with the discrimination stuff and the marginalization chart. But yeah, okay. So you might ask me, what's the opposite of wokeness? And why do people dislike it? What's the alternative idea? And that is the kind of American dream. Look, here we go. Thus, everyone must be treated equally under the law, regardless of race, gender, color, ethnicity, religion, disability, or other characteristics, without privilege, discrimination, or bias, right? Wonderful. I love this, right? Because it isn't just under the law. Everybody should be treated the same, right? That's the idea of colorblindness that is hated nowadays. They actually want people to see color, you know? I do get it though. When people say they don't see difference, they obviously do. What they actually mean is they don't treat people differently based upon their arbitrary characteristics. Which is what I think everyone should do. I think it should be illegal to discriminate positively or negatively against anyone. Oh, now for something a little bit lighter. Policing in the UK. I just thought this was funny. So you have an assailant there with a weapon. Yeah, you got all the police around him. And, you know, the police, obviously, they don't have guns in the UK. Okay, so this was a Jimmy Fallon thing. I already talked about whiteness and the hatred of it. I think this is going to be okay to watch. I'm not going to maximize it, but let's just have a little listen.
Some more news. The results of the 2020 census just came out, and for the first time in American history, the number of white people went down. Interesting reaction to that. I didn't want cheers or boos. I just wanted interesting. That's all I wanted.
Okay, I think that's very telling because people are absolutely elated that the number of white people in America has been falling, and it has been actually. In total terms, I think a lot of people have issues with their health issues with drugs, a lot of other issues. And I think people are really, really suffering, but obviously people are cheering because white people have been demonized, partly by intersectionality, by wokeness. So even white people now hate themselves. Is it causing people to basically kill them, to treat them worse? Sometimes, yeah. And I'm against all forms of discrimination, so I find this appalling. Is there a lot of actual systemic racism in the United States or the UK? Really don't think so. I think it's more classism, if I'm honest. I think people who are poor are really looked down on, doesn't matter what their background is or what their race is or anything else. And people who are sort of middle class or rich are doing very, very well, actually. And I think it is more about the groups you belong to and your ideas and how you speak, basically your social class, than it is anything else.